The alien colony had always been a peaceful and isolated community, living on a planet far from the main routes of galactic trade. Their cities were built with elegance, made of strange crystalline structures that shimmered in the light of their star. The atmosphere of their world was thin but breathable, and the alien species, known for their intelligence and adaptability, had evolved to live comfortably in harsh conditions. For generations, they had thrived without ever needing outside help, relying on their own knowledge, technology, and understanding of their environment. But everything changed one fateful day when disaster struck with terrifying speed. It began with tremors deep within the planet's crust. At first, the aliens noticed small quakes that were easily manageable. Structures trembled, crystals rattled, and minor fissures appeared on the ground, but nothing seemed serious. However, the tremors grew stronger, moving faster than anyone had ever seen. Soon, enormous cracks split the surface, swallowing roads, buildings, and entire sections of their cities. The alien scientists were baffled. Their instruments could not explain the magnitude of the seismic activity. It was as if the planet itself was rebelling against them. Panic spread among the population as the quakes intensified, turning daily life into a nightmare. Those who had walked the streets with confidence found themselves running for shelter as the ground shook violently beneath their feet. As if the tremors weren't enough, the aliens soon realized that the quakes had released something from deep underground. Strange creatures, unlike anything recorded in their history, began emerging from the fissures. These creatures were fast, powerful, and terrifying. Their bodies seemed to be made of rock and molten energy, making them nearly impervious to conventional weapons. The aliens tried to defend themselves, using their advanced technology to create barriers and energy shields. But the creatures easily bypassed these defenses. Panic turned into fear, and fear soon became desperation. The colony faced an enemy that could not be reasoned with and a natural disaster that showed no mercy. With each passing hour, the situation worsened. The alien leaders convened emergency meetings, trying to figure out a solution. They activated every early warning system and communication array in the hopes of finding assistance. For decades, the aliens had assumed that help from other species would never be needed. Their isolation had taught them something, but now, for the first time, they realized that their survival might depend on outside intervention. After careful consideration and with heavy hearts, the colony's council decided to send a distress signal. This was not a decision made lightly. They knew that calling for help meant admitting that they could not solve this crisis alone, and admitting weakness was deeply humbling for their species. Nevertheless, the severity of the situation left them with no choice. The distress signal was unlike any normal communication. It was amplified with emergency frequencies, sent across multiple dimensions of space to ensure it would be noticed. It carried detailed information about the disaster, the quakes, the emerging creatures, the state of the cities, and the desperate need for immediate assistance. The message also included coordinates, environmental readings, and the number of casualties so far. The aliens encoded their transmission with urgency and clarity, knowing that any delay could cost more lives. They sent the signal and watched, hoping that some benevolent species would receive it and respond. Days passed, and the aliens' hope began to waver. The creatures continued to wreak havoc. The ground remained unstable, and many lives had already been lost. Every hour brought new destruction and despair. Far from this struggling planet, the Deathworlders received the signal. Unlike most species, the Deathworlders thrived in extreme conditions that would kill ordinary beings. They were warriors by nature, bred for survival in harsh environments and trained for combat that spanned both planetary surfaces and the void of space. The Deathworlders had an incredible reputation. They were fearless, efficient, and unyielding in the face of danger. They were known to respond to threats or calls for help with full-force precision. When their sensors picked up the distress signal from the alien colony, they immediately recognized the severity of the situation. The signal's intensity, the detailed data, and the desperate tone all indicated that this was no ordinary emergency. This was a life-or-death scenario requiring immediate action. The Deathworlder Council did not deliberate for long. They had protocols for responding to crises, especially when another species' survival was at stake. Their decision was unanimous. They would mobilize without delay. The fleet prepared for departure, ships charging, energy weapons, defensive shields, and transport pods. The Deathworlders understood the danger of the alien planet, volatile terrain, unknown creatures, and environmental instability, but these risks only strengthened their resolve. Their culture revered courage and swift action in the face of danger. Hesitation was seen as weakness, and in their code, lives at risk demanded decisive intervention. For the aliens in distress, the arrival of the Deathworlders would be both terrifying and life-saving, a combination their species was only beginning to understand as the Deathworlders set course for the planet. The alien colony continued to fight desperately to survive. Small groups of aliens attempted to rescue civilians trapped in collapsed buildings, while others focused on repelling the monstrous creatures. Despite their technology and intelligence, the odds were against them. The aliens had never encountered predators so powerful and resistant. Weapons that once provided safety now seemed useless, and energy barriers that had protected entire cities failed to hold. The alien scientists, once confident in their knowledge, worked frantically to devise any solution that could save lives. But time was running out. Families huddled together in fear, and the sound of cracking earth and distant explosions became a constant reminder of the planet's fragility. The psychological toll was immense. Fear and despair crept into every corner of the colony. Children cried for parents they could not reach, and adults feared for their loved ones and for their entire civilization. The alien leaders had to make impossible choices: who to rescue first, how to allocate scarce resources, and whether to risk their own lives to save others. Every decision was a gamble, every choice a burden heavier than they had ever faced. And yet, through all this chaos, a flicker of hope remained, the hope that their call for help had reached someone strong enough to change the course of their fate. They could not yet know that the Deathworlders were already in motion, racing through space to arrive in time. Meanwhile, aboard the Deathworlder ships, preparations continued with meticulous precision. Every crew member understood the stakes. Every pilot knew the risks of descending onto an unstable world, and every warrior braced for combat. Their approach was calculated but swift. They studied the planet's signals, anticipating the locations of the most severe disturbances and the movements of the deadly creatures. The Deathworlders were methodical, but they did not hesitate. Their philosophy was simple: act decisively, strike with overwhelming force, and protect those who cannot protect themselves. For them, arriving late was not an option. The lives of the alien colony depended on their speed and efficiency. The anticipation of contact between the two species added tension to the scenario. The aliens did not know what to expect. They had never seen beings like the Deathworlders before. Stories and myths in their culture spoke of distant warriors who could appear suddenly in times of crisis. But such tales were considered exaggerations, legendary, not real. When they finally detected the approaching fleet, awe and fear mixed in equal measure. These newcomers were unlike any they had ever encountered. Their ships were massive, their weapons arrays unmistakable, and the aura of power surrounding them was undeniable. The aliens realized that salvation had arrived, but it came in a form that was as frightening as it was hopeful. Even as the Deathworlders approached, the alien colony braced for the unknown. Their distress signal had summoned help, and that help was coming with full force. The aliens prepared to communicate, to guide, and to survive alongside these powerful warriors. Every detail of their situation had been transmitted. Every plea for life had been sent, and now it was up to the Deathworlders to act. The colony could only hope that these formidable beings would not mistake them for obstacles or threats, but would see them as the helpless beings they truly were. For the first time in what felt like endless days of terror, the alien species dared to hope that survival was possible, that they were not alone in the vast, uncaring void of space. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test courage, intelligence, and sheer determination. The alien colony, battered and terrified, waited. The Deathworlders, unstoppable and resolute, prepared to descend. The first part of this epic story had reached its climax: a desperate call for help, an impending arrival, and the promise of action that could change the fate of an entire civilization. In this moment, the universe felt both terrifying and full of possibility, as two very different species were about to collide in a way that neither could have imagined. The Deathworlder fleet approached the alien planet with calculated precision. From orbit, the surface looked like a shattered gem. The ground cracked and split by powerful tremors, entire cities reduced to rubble, and strange, flickering lights scattered across the land. Smoke rose from many areas, swirling into the thin atmosphere and painting the skies with dark streaks. Rivers of molten rock glimmered from deep fissures, and the aliens watched from their hiding places as the newcomers arrived, unsure whether they would bring salvation or further destruction. Despite the devastation, there was an undeniable sense of awe at the sheer presence of the Deathworlder ships. Their enormous hulls reflected the weak sunlight in cold, metallic glints, and the energy shields surrounding each vessel pulsed with controlled power. To the alien colony, who had never seen a fleet of such magnitude, the sight was both terrifying and mesmerizing. From the Deathworlder perspective, the planet presented many challenges. Their scanners indicated that the surface was unstable, and the creatures emerging from the fissures were highly aggressive and adaptive. The ground continued to shift, making landing and maneuvering extremely dangerous, but the Deathworlders were experts in navigating hostile environments. They had survived planets with extreme heat, poisonous atmospheres, and predators far deadlier than anything the aliens had ever imagined. For them, the planet was dangerous, yes, but not insurmountable. They had trained their entire lives for situations like this: extreme conditions, overwhelming odds, and life-or-death missions. The fleet adjusted its formation, moving carefully yet swiftly toward the coordinates of the alien colony. Every ship, every pilot, and every warrior understood their role in the coming operation. There was no room for error. As the Deathworlders prepared to land, the alien colony observed cautiously from the edges of their ruined cities. They had never seen beings like these before, tall, muscular, and armored in strange materials that seemed to shimmer with energy. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and their movements were precise and deliberate. Even without weapons deployed, their presence radiated power. The aliens whispered to each other in fear and wonder, unsure if these warriors were friend or foe. Many families gathered together in hiding, some standing on the remnants of crumbled buildings to get a glimpse of the newcomers. Though hope flickered in their hearts, so did fear. These Deathworlders were unknown, and their reputation as merciless warriors had reached the colony through scattered stories and rumors passed down for generations. Now the aliens could witness it for themselves. The first ships descended carefully toward the surface, using anti-gravity technology to hover above the fissured terrain. Landing zones had to be chosen carefully. Even the slightest miscalculation could send the massive vessels crashing into the ground. The Deathworlder scanners identified stable plateaus and cleared areas where their transport pods could land safely. Despite the chaos on the planet, their movements were controlled and precise. As the pods touched down, a low hum of energy filled the air, shaking nearby structures and alerting the aliens to the arrival of the reinforcements. Some aliens approached cautiously, still unsure whether to flee or trust these powerful beings. The Deathworlders deployed quickly. From their pods emerged warriors clad in armor that gleamed with an almost organic quality, as if it was alive. They moved in disciplined formations, their weapons at the ready, scanning for threats both natural and unnatural. The creatures that had emerged from the planet's depths sensed the newcomers immediately. Unlike the alien population, the Deathworlders did not inspire fear, they inspired wariness and caution. The strange creatures retreated momentarily, assessing these new intruders. The Deathworlders' presence changed the dynamics of the battlefield instantly. Where the alien colony had been overwhelmed, hope now sparked. The Deathworlders, by merely arriving, had shifted the balance of power. Even before a single shot was fired, the alien leaders took cautious steps to communicate. Using their emergency frequencies, they attempted to convey that they meant no harm and needed assistance. The Deathworlders, having intercepted the transmission, understood instantly. Their protocol was simple: protect the helpless and neutralize immediate threats. They moved toward the colony's most damaged districts, scanning for survivors trapped under rubble and monitoring the activity of the dangerous creatures. For the aliens, seeing this level of efficiency was almost unbelievable. They had spent days fighting for survival with limited tools, and now these newcomers were analyzing, coordinating, and executing strategies that seemed impossible under such extreme conditions. As the Deathworlders advanced, that alien population could see their tactical approach. The warriors spread out in a grid-like pattern, covering as much area as possible while remaining prepared for the unpredictable movements of the creatures. The aliens noticed that the Deathworlders did not panic or hesitate, even when the ground beneath them trembled violently. Their movements were calculated, their focus unwavering. Every alien who witnessed this knew that they were observing a species designed to confront extreme danger. Fear began to mix with admiration. The Deathworlders were terrifying in their appearance and actions, but their presence also represented a chance for survival that had almost disappeared. The alien colony was still struggling to rebuild communication networks, clear rubble, and protect civilians. But the arrival of the Deathworlders provided a clear solution: intervention at full force. The aliens, while cautious, began to work alongside the Deathworld. They guided the newcomers to the most critical areas, marking zones where survivors were trapped or where the creatures posed the greatest threat. For the first time in days, the aliens felt coordinated. There was a sense of relief as the combination of their knowledge and the Deathworlders' power began to take shape. The two species, though very different, were united by a common goal: survival. As night fell on the devastated planet, the situation remained dangerous but increasingly manageable. Fires burned in some areas, while others were cleared and made safe. The Deathworlders maintained their positions, patrolling the streets, scanning the terrain, and preparing for the inevitable attacks by the strange creatures. The alien colony had begun to understand the scope of the warriors' abilities. Their energy shields could protect large groups of civilians, their weapons could neutralize threats that had seemed invincible, and their coordination suggested intelligence far beyond what the colony had encountered before. Even those who were initially terrified began to feel a cautious trust. Though the Deathworlders' methods were aggressive and frightening, it became clear that their goal was protection, not destruction. The alien children, who had spent days hiding in fear, now observed the Deathworlders with a mix of wonder and curiosity. Some dared to approach, their tiny forms showing bravery that had been suppressed by constant fear. The Deathworlders acknowledged them with nods or small gestures, careful not to frighten the younglings further. For the first time in days, laughter and whispers could be heard amidst the chaos, a subtle but significant sign that hope was returning. The adults watched closely, understanding that the presence of these warriors was a turning point. They would fight, defend, and protect, allowing the alien population to begin recovering, at least partially, from the overwhelming destruction that had engulfed their world. At the same time, the Deathworlders remained vigilant. Their scanners detected new fissures opening and creatures emerging, and they adjusted their positions accordingly. No threat was too small or too sudden to escape their notice. The aliens marveled at how the warriors seemed to anticipate danger before it occurred. The Deathworlders had a presence that reassured the colony, yet their intensity reminded the aliens that survival required obedience, coordination, and vigilance. It was a delicate balance between awe and fear, between relief and the understanding that these warriors were not ordinary allies, they were forces of nature, unstoppable in their resolve. By the time the first full cycle of the planet's day passed since their arrival, the Deathworlders had established a clear pattern of protection and intervention. The aliens could finally rest, if only briefly, as the warriors held the line against the ongoing threats. The colony began to organize rescue operations, clearing rubble and tending to the wounded. Guided and supported by the initial terror of their arrival had transformed into cautious optimism. Though the Deathworlders' methods were intense and intimidating, the results were undeniable. Lives were being saved, and the colony's survival chances had dramatically improved. The alien colony realized that the arrival of the Deathworlders had not just brought protection, it had changed their perspective on the universe. They were beings in the cosmos whose power and determination went beyond their imagination, capable of responding to a desperate cry for help with swift and decisive action. The aliens began to see that survival sometimes required accepting help from forces far greater than themselves, even when that help was both frightening and overwhelming. The Deathworlders wasted no time once they had established their presence on the planet. They had assessed the situation carefully, noting the areas most affected by the quakes and the zones where the monstrous creatures had emerged. Their strategy was clear and uncompromising: neutralize the threats with precision, protect the alien population, and restore a level of order that had seemed impossible. They moved like a force of nature, swift and unrelenting. Their movements coordinated with a level of discipline that left the aliens both awed and intimidated. Even from a distance, it was clear that these were not ordinary warriors. Every action was calculated, every strike deliberate, and every maneuver designed to achieve maximum effect while minimizing unnecessary risk to those they were protecting. The creatures that had terrorized the alien colony for days were the first to encounter the full might of the death. These beings, born from the planet's violent upheaval, were formidable in every sense. Their bodies were armored with rock-like plating, their claws could tear through metal, and their senses were finely tuned to detect even the slightest movement. For the first time, however, the creatures faced opponents who matched their aggression with equal or greater power. The Deathworlders did not hesitate. They attacked decisively, using weapons that emitted energy waves capable of disorienting and neutralizing the creatures. The aliens watched in awe as the battle unfolded, realizing that the warriors' efficiency and speed were far beyond anything they could have imagined. The Deathworlders coordinated their assault with military precision. Some units moved directly into areas where the creatures were concentrated, drawing them away from civilians, while others used ranged energy weapons to strike at distant threats. The ground shook under the force of their attacks. Fissures widened and closed in response, and the very air seemed charged with the energy of the combat. Despite the intensity of the confrontation, the Deathworlders maintained strict control over their operations. They avoided unnecessary destruction of the colony's infrastructure whenever possible, directing their force toward the creatures themselves and the most immediate hazards. The aliens, watching from the safety of partially intact buildings or behind energy shields, began to understand the extent of the Deathworlders' discipline and training. One of the most remarkable aspects of the Deathworlders' response was their ability to adapt in real time. The creatures, though powerful, were unpredictable, emerging from unexpected fissures or attacking from angles the aliens had never anticipated. Each time the creatures attempted to regroup or flank the Deathworlders, the warriors countered with remarkable foresight. They adjusted formations, shifted firepower, and even used the terrain to their advantage. The aliens marveled at how the Deathworlders seemed almost to anticipate the movements of the creatures before they occurred. It was as if the warriors were not only responding to threats but predicting them, using intelligence and instinct combined in a way that seemed almost supernatural. As the battle continued, the alien colony began to take note of the strategies employed by the Death. They moved in groups that supported each other, each warrior aware of their surroundings and the actions of their comrades. Communication was instantaneous and precise, conveyed through signals and gestures that the aliens could barely comprehend. The Deathworlders had no visible leaders giving orders in a traditional sense. Instead, the entire force seemed synchronized, working as a single, unstoppable entity. For the alien observers, it was both terrifying and inspiring. They had lived in fear for so long, seeing their world destroyed and their people hunted. And now, for the first time, they were witnessing a force that could confront the chaos with certainty and strength. The use of firepower by the Deathworlders was overwhelming but calculated. Energy beams carved paths through the creatures' ranks, disabling their offensive capabilities without unnecessary collateral damage. Explosions rocked the ground where the creatures had formed nests or hidden in fissures, but civilians were carefully evacuated by teams of Deathworlders, ensuring that no alien was harmed in the process. The sheer scale and intensity of the response was unlike anything the colony had ever experienced. It was as if a storm had descended upon the planet, and the Deathworlders were both the force of the storm and the shelter protecting those caught within it. The aliens, despite their fear, began to understand that the overwhelming force they witnessed was not cruelty, it was necessity. The creatures themselves reacted with increasing desperation. They had never encountered opponents who could match their strength and resilience so directly. Many of them tried to flee, only to be intercepted by rapid response units of Deathworlders who could anticipate their paths. Others fought until they were completely overwhelmed, unable to counter the precision and adaptability of their enemies. The aliens, who had spent days hiding and defending themselves with limited success, felt a mixture of relief and awe. The Deathworlders' assault was terrifying to witness, yet it also offered the promise of survival, a promise that had seemed impossible just hours before. Amid the chaos of the battle, the Deathworlders also ensured the safety of the alien population. Rescue teams moved through the cities, locating survivors trapped under debris, injured or disoriented. Civilians were guided to temporary safe zones where they could receive assistance and remain protected from both the creatures and the unstable environment. The aliens were amazed at the speed and efficiency with which the Deathworlders coordinated these rescue operations. What had once been a city in total disarray began to show signs of order. Streets were cleared, fires were contained, and trapped citizens were brought to safety. The contrast between the destruction caused by the tremors and the creatures and the organized response of the Deathworlders was stark, highlighting the warriors' extraordinary capability to manage even the most chaotic situations. Even the leadership of the alien colony, who had been responsible for coordinating emergency responses, felt the overwhelming impact of the Deathworlders' intervention. They could see the difference between their efforts alone and the combined approach with the warriors. Whereas they had struggled to save a handful of people at a time, the Deathworlders managed to secure entire neighborhoods simultaneously. Their methods were efficient and ruthless in the sense of being uncompromising. But every action was guided by a purpose: to save lives and neutralize threats. The alien leaders began to realize that survival in the face of such extreme danger required accepting the guidance and force of these powerful beings, no matter how intimidating their presence might be. By the time the battle reached its peak, the alien population was witnessing something they would never forget. The creatures that had terrorized them for days were being eliminated or driven into containment zones. The Deathworlders moved seamlessly between offensive actions against the creatures and defensive measures for the colony. Every explosion, every strike, every tactical maneuver was part of a larger plan, a choreography of force that combined efficiency, precision, and absolute control. The aliens could see that these warriors were not acting out of malice, they were acting out of necessity, using every resource, every weapon, and every tactic at their disposal to ensure that the colony survived. During lulls in the battle, the aliens had brief moments to observe and understand their protectors. The Deathworlders did not rest in the way ordinary beings might. Even when not engaged in direct combat, they patrolled, monitored, and maintained readiness for any sudden threat. Their stamina was extraordinary, their focus unwavering. The alien population, who had once feared that the planet's disasters would end their civilization, now recognized that the arrival of the Deathworlders had dramatically altered their fate. The warriors' full-force response was as much about instilling order and confidence as it was about neutralizing the immediate danger. By the end of the first full cycle of combat, the alien colony could see the results clearly. The most immediate threats had been neutralized. Large sections of the city were cleared, and the creatures' offensive capabilities had been dramatically reduced. The aliens began to emerge from their hiding places, cautiously at first, then with increasing confidence. They helped in rescue efforts, guided the Deathworlders through unknown zones, and began to feel a renewed sense of hope. The terrifying force that had descended upon them had become the shield they had prayed for, a lifeline that combined overwhelming power with calculated protection. The alien population understood that the battle was not over. The planet was still unstable, and pockets of danger remained. However, the arrival and full-force response of the Deathworlders had shifted the balance completely. Where chaos had reigned, now there was control. Where fear had dominated, now there was hope. The aliens realized that they were witnessing something extraordinary, a species capable of responding to a desperate call for help with unmatched efficiency, power, and precision. The experience left a lasting impression, instilling both respect and a measure of awe. The aliens began to internalize a crucial lesson. Sometimes survival demands extreme action, and sometimes salvation comes in forms that are terrifying yet necessary. The Deathworlders' full-force response was overwhelming, yes, but it was also life-saving, and it had ensured that the colony could continue to exist, even in the face of unprecedented threats. The first major phase of their intervention had ended, and the aliens now looked forward with cautious optimism, knowing that the warriors would continue to secure their world and protect those who could not protect themselves. After the Deathworlders had neutralized the most immediate threats and secured large parts of the alien colony, a sense of cautious relief began to settle among the survivors. The streets, though scarred and damaged, were no longer crawling with the terrifying creatures that had held the colony in their grip. Fires were being contained, rubble cleared, and trapped civilians rescued. The alien population, who had spent days in panic and fear, now had the chance to breathe, to observe, and to understand the magnitude of what had just occurred. They could see, more clearly than ever, the overwhelming power and efficiency of the Deathworlders, and it left an indelible mark on their understanding of the universe. Survival, they realized, sometimes required the intervention of forces far beyond their own capacity. The alien leaders, once unsure how to manage the chaos, now watched in awe as the Deathworlders coordinated the recovery operations. Large sections of the colony were being stabilized in a way that the aliens had never imagined possible. Buildings that had partially collapsed were being reinforced using alien technology guided by the warriors. Streets were cleared of debris, and energy barriers were deployed strategically to protect civilians from any remaining threats. The Deathworlders had a methodical approach: first neutralize, then secure, and finally stabilize. Every action, no matter how small, was part of a larger plan designed to restore a sense of safety in order to a planet that had been on the brink of destruction. The creatures, though mostly defeated, still posed a risk in isolated areas. The Deathworlders moved with relentless determination to ensure that none could regroup or threaten the colony again. Specialized squads were sent to patrol fissures and previously unstable zones, using advanced scanning technology to detect any remaining signs of danger. When a creature was found, it was either neutralized or contained, leaving no room for error. The aliens could hardly believe the precision with which the warriors operated. They had watched for days as the creatures had terrorized their world, and now they were seeing them systematically eliminated or contained with near-perfect efficiency. Fear began to give way to a growing sense of trust in these formidable beings. At the same time, the Deathworlders focused on assisting the alien population in practical ways beyond combat. Medical teams were deployed to tend to the wounded, providing rapid treatment for injuries that had previously seemed insurmountable. They used technology that could accelerate healing and stabilize critical conditions almost instantly. Civilians who had been trapped for days received care immediately upon being rescued, while the Deathworlders also provided temporary shelters for families whose homes had been destroyed. The aliens, who had feared that much of their population might be lost, now found hope in these acts of organized assistance. The combination of brute force and thoughtful aid highlighted the unique approach of the Deathworlders. They were not only warriors but protectors, willing to take the full risk to save lives. The alien scientists, who had been struggling to understand the planetary disturbances, found themselves collaborating with the Deathworlders in unprecedented ways. Data about the tremors, the fissures, and the strange creatures was analyzed jointly, combining the knowledge of both species. The Deathworlders, though primarily warriors, possessed a deep understanding of environmental hazards and could provide guidance on stabilizing dangerous zones. Together, they devised strategies to prevent further catastrophic events, reinforcing the planet's vulnerable areas and minimizing the risk of new fissures forming. The aliens were amazed at how much faster solutions could be implemented when working alongside such skilled and resourceful beings. Psychologically, the impact of the Deathworlders' intervention was profound. The alien population, once gripped by despair, began to regain a sense of normalcy. Children, who had been hidden away in fear for days, began to emerge, watching the warriors move with fascination and awe. Adults, too, started participating in recovery efforts, guided by the Deathworlders' instructions. Even those who had been skeptical or fearful of the newcomers could no longer deny the life-saving impact of their presence. A shared sense of purpose began to emerge, bridging the gap between the two species and establishing a foundation for cooperation and mutual respect. The alien leaders held discussions with the Deathworlders to understand their long-term plans. Though the warriors had no desire to remain permanently, they emphasized the importance of restoring basic stability before leaving. They trained selected alien volunteers in defense tactics, emergency response, and strategies for monitoring environmental hazards. The goal was not to make the aliens dependent but to equip them with the knowledge and skills necessary to maintain order and prevent further disasters. This approach reflected a balance between overwhelming intervention and the promotion of self-sufficiency, a philosophy that was new and enlightening to the alien population. As the immediate threats were addressed, the alien colony began to take stock of its losses and its survival. Entire neighborhoods had been devastated, but thanks to the Deathworlders, the number of casualties was far lower than it could have been. Survivors gathered together to mourn, rebuild, and plan for the future. In the midst of grief and devastation, there was also gratitude for the warriors who had arrived when hope seemed lost, who had fought tirelessly to protect lives, and who had shown that even in the darkest times, intervention was possible. Stories of bravery and decisive action began to circulate among the population, turning the Deathworlders into legends. Both feared and revered the Deathworlders, even as they continued their efforts, who remained focused on their ultimate objective: complete neutralization of immediate threats and stabilization of the colony. They reinforced defensive perimeters, monitored for any resurgence of creatures, and ensured that environmental hazards were contained. Their presence was a constant reassurance to the aliens, who had endured days of terror and uncertainty. The warriors' efficiency was not limited to combat. It extended to organization, logistics, and strategic planning, all of which contributed to the rapid recovery of the colony. Every action reinforced the message that the Deathworlders' purpose was protection, survival, and the restoration of order. The aliens, through observation and experience, began to internalize important lessons about resilience and preparedness. They learned that even the most isolated and self-reliant societies could benefit from external assistance in times of extreme danger. They understood that while their technology and intelligence were advanced, there were limits to what they could achieve alone. The Deathworlders' intervention had demonstrated the importance of collaboration, decisive action, and the willingness to accept help from forces whose power far exceeded their own. It was a humbling yet enlightening experience, one that would shape their cultural understanding for generations to come. As the day ended and the skies of the alien planet grew quiet, the colony reflected on the events that had transpired. The Deathworlders had arrived, unleashed their full force to neutralize threats, and help the population recover from disaster. Their methods, though aggressive and overwhelming, had been precise and effective. The alien population had survived a catastrophe that would have otherwise claimed countless lives. In witnessing the warriors' discipline, efficiency, and determination, the aliens realized that the Deathworlders' actions were not driven by cruelty or domination, but by an unwavering commitment to protect and preserve life. The alien leaders began to see the broader implications of the intervention. The Deathworlders had established a reputation not just for raw power but for an uncompromising approach to saving lives. The colony now possessed new knowledge, skills, and an understanding of strategic coordination that would allow them to respond more effectively to future crises. The presence of the Deathworlders had transformed their perception of the universe, revealing the existence of beings capable of acting decisively in ways the aliens had never imagined. They had witnessed a blend of overwhelming strength, tactical brilliance, and protective intent that left a lasting impression on every individual who survived the ordeal. Even after the immediate threats were addressed, the alien colony understood that their world would never be the same. The tremors and fissures had left permanent scars on the landscape, and the memory of the creatures' attacks would not be forgotten. Yet, the intervention of the Deathworlders had provided a sense of hope, a reassurance that survival was possible even in the most extreme circumstances. The aliens began to plan for reconstruction, aware that the knowledge imparted by the warriors would help them prevent or respond to future crises more effectively. They were no longer entirely alone in the universe. The Deathworlders had demonstrated that help could arrive when it was most needed, even from the most fearsome and formidable allies. In the aftermath, the alien population celebrated their survival in quiet, reflective ways. Families reunited, communities began to rebuild, and the children explored areas that had been previously too dangerous. The stories of the Deathworlders' intervention spread quickly, becoming both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration. For the first time in what felt like endless days of fear and uncertainty, the colony felt a sense of renewed possibility. They had endured, learned, and witnessed a force that would remain legendary in their history. The balance between fear and gratitude defined their experience, highlighting the complex and awe-inspiring nature of the Deathworlders' intervention. Through all this, the Deathworlders remained vigilant, ensuring that every threat had been neutralized, every civilian was protected, and the colony had the tools and knowledge to maintain safety on their own. Their presence was a constant reminder that survival sometimes required extreme action, but also that such intervention could be precise, calculated, and ultimately life-saving. The alien colony had been tested in ways they never imagined, and they had emerged not only alive but profoundly changed, with a new understanding of strength, cooperation, and the limits of their own resilience. After the immediate crisis had been contained, and the alien colony had begun to recover, the Deathworlders prepared to leave. Their presence, though formidable and sometimes terrifying, had brought salvation. The aliens had survived what seemed like certain destruction, and now they could finally begin the process of rebuilding their homes, their cities, and their lives. The warriors had not stayed long unnecessarily. Their mission was always clear: to intervene decisively, neutralize the threats, and ensure that those in danger could survive without becoming permanently dependent on their power. Yet, even in their departure, their impact would be long, leaving the alien colony forever changed. The alien population, while relieved, felt a mix of emotions as they watched the Deathworlders depart. Gratitude was intertwined with awe and a subtle, lingering fear. These beings had been both protectors and overwhelming forces of nature, capable of immense destruction if provoked, yet completely dedicated to saving lives. The aliens had witnessed unmatched efficiency, precision, and power in action, and the experience was humbling. They understood that the Deathworlders operated on a level far beyond their own capacity. Every action, from rescuing civilians to eliminating dangerous creatures, had been executed with such speed and control that it was almost impossible to comprehend. For the aliens, the departure of the Deathworlders was both a relief and a stark reminder of the fragile nature of their existence. As the Deathworlders lifted off from the planet, the alien leaders gathered to reflect on what had transpired. They realized that their civilization had been transformed in more ways than one. Not only had they survived a catastrophic event, but they had also witnessed the intervention of a species whose power and determination redefined their understanding of survival and protection. The Alien Council began discussing how to apply the lessons they had learned. They would strengthen their emergency systems, improve their defensive technology, and train a new generation to respond more effectively to crises. The Deathworlders had left a blueprint of sorts, not one that dictated every step, but one that demonstrated what was possible when courage, skill, and decisive action were combined. The alien scientists continued to study the data and insights provided by the Deathworld. They had observed advanced techniques for stabilizing the environment, containing dangerous creatures, and organizing emergency responses that were far beyond anything previously known to their species. These methods would now become part of the colony's knowledge, guiding future strategies for survival. The collaboration, brief though it had been, had left a profound impact on the alien culture. They realized that the universe was populated with beings of incredible ability and that understanding, cooperation, and adaptability were essential for survival. For a society that had long relied solely on itself, this was a transformative lesson. Children, who had experienced days of fear and uncertainty, now explored the restored areas under the watchful eyes of the adults. They had seen the Deathworlders in action and carried vivid memories of their power, discipline, and decisiveness. Stories of the warriors' bravery and efficiency quickly became part of the colony's oral history, told repeatedly as a mix of caution and inspiration. The young ones grew up knowing that while the universe could be dangerous, there were beings capable of extraordinary intervention when lives were at stake. This knowledge instilled both respect for strength and hope for protection, shaping the cultural identity of the colony for generations. Even as the alien population began to rebuild, they felt a profound change in their perception of interstellar relations. The Deathworlders' intervention had demonstrated that help could come from unexpected sources, and that survival might sometimes depend on forming alliances with species whose abilities far exceeded their own. The colony's leaders started to reconsider previous isolationist policies, understanding that engagement with other civilizations could provide crucial support in times of extreme danger. The experience of being saved by such a powerful and precise force reshaped their approach to diplomacy, strategy, and interstellar awareness. They had learned the hard way that strength alone could not guarantee survival. Recognizing and utilizing external support was equally important. Among the alien population, there were those who struggled to reconcile the awe and fear they felt toward the death. These warriors were terrifying in appearance and overwhelming in capability, yet their actions had been undeniably life-saving. The aliens came to understand that true power was not only in the ability to destroy but also in the wisdom to protect. The Deathworlders had acted decisively, but always with a clear purpose: to save those who could not save themselves. This duality left a lasting impression, teaching the aliens that the most formidable forces in the universe might also be its most compassionate, provided their actions were guided by principles and resolve. As weeks passed, the alien colony continued to rebuild, applying the lessons they had learned. Structures were reconstructed using improved designs inspired by the Deathworlders' tactical observations. Emergency protocols were revised, and defensive measures were implemented to prevent similar disasters in the future. Even the creatures that had once threatened their survival were studied more carefully, and measures were put in place to monitor and contain them proactively. The aliens recognized that their world was still vulnerable, but now they possessed the knowledge, training, and resilience to face challenges more effectively. The intervention had not only saved lives but had also empowered the colony to safeguard its future. The departure of the Deathworlders did not erase the memory of their presence. The aliens continued to talk about them, sharing stories of their overwhelming power, their precise and effective strategies, and their unwavering dedication to protection. The warriors had become legends, symbols of both fear and hope, whose actions would be remembered for generations. Young aliens grew up hearing tales of the rescue, internalizing lessons about courage, discipline, and the importance of swift, decisive action in the face of extreme danger. Even those who had once doubted the effectiveness of outside intervention came to respect the critical role that Deathworlders had played in their survival. As months passed, the alien colony gradually returned to a semblance of normal life. Daily routines resumed, markets reopened, and families rebuilt homes destroyed by the tremors and attacks. Yet, the memory of the crisis and the intervention of the Deathworlders remained vivid. The aliens understood that survival had come at a cost, but that cost had been mitigated by the extraordinary actions of beings who had appeared at the moment of greatest need. The experience reinforced the importance of vigilance, preparedness, and the ability to adapt to unexpected circumstances. For the colony, life was no longer only about survival. It was about learning, improving, and preparing for whatever the universe might throw at them next. The cultural impact of the Deathworlders' intervention was profound. Scholars and leaders began incorporating the lessons learned into education, strategy, and governance. The colony had witnessed firsthand how decisive action, combined with strategic planning, could turn even the most desperate situations into manageable outcomes. These teachings were now embedded in the collective consciousness, shaping the way the alien society approached challenges and threats. Respect for strength, careful observation, and coordinated action became core principles, inspired by the warriors who had saved them when their world had teetered on the edge of destruction. In the wider galactic community, the story of the Deathworlders' intervention began to spread. Neighboring civilizations heard of the rescue and marveled at the precision and efficiency displayed. The alien colony became a symbol of both vulnerability and resilience, a place where extraordinary power had intervened at the right moment to save countless lives. The tale reinforced the idea that the universe was populated by forces that were both formidable and protective, and that even isolated societies could sometimes rely on these powers when survival demanded it. The alien population realized that while they had endured suffering, they had also been witnesses to something extraordinary, the combination of power, discipline, and purpose that had changed the fate of their civilization. In time, the alien colony fully recovered, their cities rebuilt, and their society strengthened by the experience. The Deathworlders had left behind not just survivors but a transformed civilization, one more aware of the vastness of the universe, the dangers it contained, and the forces capable of shaping life and death. Their intervention had left a legacy of courage, efficiency, and protection that would resonate for generations. Every alien, from the youngest child to the oldest leader, carried the memory of the warriors' arrival, their overwhelming force, and their unwavering dedication to saving lives. Though the Deathworlders had departed, the bond they created, however brief, endured. The aliens knew that if such threats arose again, help might come from beyond their world. They had been shown that the universe contained forces capable of intervening decisively, and that survival was sometimes dependent on recognizing and trusting those forces. The colony's perception of strength, protection, and interstellar cooperation had been permanently altered. The Deathworlders had not only saved lives, they had changed the way an entire civilization viewed the universe and their place within it. As the last echoes of their presence faded from the skies, the alien population stood united in gratitude, awe, and determination. They had survived, learned, and grown stronger, equipped with new knowledge, skills, and hope. The memory of the Deathworlders' intervention would never fade. It would serve as a reminder that courage, decisiveness, and overwhelming force, when guided by purpose, could save civilizations even in the direst circumstances. The aliens had witnessed history in motion, and they had survived to tell the tale story of destruction, intervention, and ultimately, survival.